chaplain leads us in prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. O eternal Lord God, from whom alone cometh wisdom and understanding, we beseech thee to direct aright the minds of those who are about to take counsel together on matters pertaining to the common life of this borough of Christchurch, that in all their deliberations and decisions they may faithfully discharge the duties of their office, and ever promote the health, safety, and well-being of those whom they seek to serve, for the honour and glory of thy holy name. Amen. I have another prayer this evening, and I'm grateful for the Mayor's permission to use it. As some of you may know, our partners in Christchurch, New Zealand, are in a state of emergency today, as a former cyclone, Gita, has just hit that part of the world. So may we pray for them and hold these, our partners, in our prayers. Heavenly Father, we look to you in hope and trust for the people of Christchurch, New Zealand, and for those of their neighbours in the midst of natural disaster. Accept our compassion for those who suffer, whether those who are injured or made homeless, and bless all those who are working for their relief. And this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
And we join together all these our prayers as we pray with confidence in the words which our Saviour taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen.
Would you please remain standing for a moment while I have some sad news for you all? I'd like to pay tribute to the past Mayor and Mayor, Mrs. June Payne, the past Mayoress of Doris Kidman, and the past Mace Bearer, Ron Chapley. They both passed away very recently. So I would like a silent tribute, please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. We'll now take item 2 on the agenda, apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had an apology from Councillor Davis and Councillor Mrs. Darren Wilkes.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It may not actually come to that, but for clarity, I'd like it noting that I am chairman of the County's Regulatory Committee which will in due course consider the minerals and waste policy. If there is any discussion on, I'm advised that I may remain here unless there is any discussion on that item, and if there is anything other than the formal acceptance of the minutes, then I have to leave.
Mr. Jones, would you like to explain the council tax dispensation, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to confirm to members that all members currently hold a valid dispensation to deal with all matters related to the council tax until May 2019.
Thank you. I take item 4 on the agenda, the minutes. I'd like to ask Councillor Flagg and Mrs. Jameson to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to propose for the acceptance of the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of December and the extraordinary meeting held on the 2nd of January. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I wasn't actually at the meeting on the 2nd of January, but I've been assured that as we're only accepting the minutes, I can second, so happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Are there any objections to the minutes? Item 5, the announcement. Since last council, we have had quite a number of mayoral engagements which are attached to the agenda, but which I'd like to mention just 2. We attended the Highcliffe Charity Players, who gave a fantastic performance of their pantomime Dick Whittington. It really was fun, and it was a sellout, and I think there were more adults there than children, and they seemed to enjoy it as well. Last Thursday, my wife Gillian and I had the privilege of hosting the Mayor of Alan in Christchurch. We entertained him in the old town hall and showed him around Christchurch. He was very, very impressed with our town. Thanks also go to David Flagg and the members of the Twinning Association for making him so welcome. Just a few notes for your diary, dates for your diary. We're holding a charity dinner on the 9th of March at the Christchurch Harbour Hotel. There are a few tickets left if members want to support me. We're also having a charity golf day on the 13th of April at Highcliffe Golf Course. There are a few teams required. We need about another 5. We're also holding a charity quiz on the 26th of April at Christchurch Sailing Club. Tickets are available from my secretary. Thank you very much. Do I call upon David, the leader?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just 2 items this evening, members. Just to confirm that we still await a decision from the Secretary of State with regards to the future Dorset proposal. And just to remind members that the next meeting of the Joint Committee is tomorrow morning, 10 AM at Bournemouth Town Hall. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members. Nothing from me this evening. Thank you.
We'll now take item 6 on the agenda, questions from members of the public. I'd like to invite Mrs. Delia Ricketts, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Christchurch residents overwhelmingly respond to the Council's Coastal Strategy consultation, as reported to the Community Committee on the 24th of January, was that they want to see the castle zigzag path rebuilt. Those responses came from a far wider audience than just Highcliffe, indeed almost as wide as the 3,250 people who signed our original petition to keep the zigzag open. Do you need any further evidence to prove that the zigzag is a vital route to the beach for both the able and the less able, and that it must be rebuilt without further delay?
Thank you, Mrs. Ricketts, for your question. The Task and Finish group have spent many hours debating the future of the zigzag and have explored every avenue, as you will note from the report that they have set out in their recommendations. I believe that the Task and Finish group have had enough information to form a balanced judgment. I'm sure that when this item is debated later in the agendas, a decision will be made that is in the best interests of Christchurch.
I have a subsidiary question, if that's all right. In the event that you decide tonight to proceed with this work, I can assure you from extensive local knowledge that the noise and disturbance caused when the work is ongoing will be readily forgiven by locals and tourists alike, provided it speeds up the completion date. Can you give a firm commitment that every effort will be made to complete the rebuild in time for us to enjoy the path for at least some of the 2018 season?
I do hope so. I now call upon Mr. Ian Nichols, please.
Good evening, Mayor. Even after the financial commitments made recently to repair the Regional Centre, upgrade the promenade at Avon Beach and provide various and new replacement car parking spaces around the town, the Council still retains uncommitted reserves totalling over 1.6 million, plus a further 150,000 unallocated within the capital programme. In addition, we trust that significant additional monies will also be available to the Council in respect to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency land transaction in Penny Way. Can you please confirm that all these funds are as equally available for the reconstruction of the zigzag path as they have been for the other mentioned schemes in the borough?
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank Mr. Ian Nichols for his question. Thank you for your question. The issue of funding for the zigzag will be debated in response to the report, which will come before the Council later this evening. Thank you.
My supplementary question. With local government reorganisation threatened imminently, do you agree it would be fair and equitable if the reserves that have been set aside using Christchurch taxpayers' money were used on Christchurch schemes rather than being put into the new authority's pot to be used elsewhere?
Mr. Mayor, I think the answer is yes.
Thank you very much.
I'd now like to call upon Judy Berman, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor David Flagg. Inviting the residents group to work with councillors on the task and finish group has proved to be an extremely interesting and, we believe, rewarding experience. Given that we have helped to bring the project to a stage where you are now debating a motion giving the go-ahead to the project, can you agree with us that inviting members of the public to assist future task and finish groups could be a very effective way to enhance Christchurch's reputation as an open and listening council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question. The contribution of the residents to the work of the Task and Finish group is acknowledged in the report, which follows later in this evening's meeting. There have been many other occasions where contributions to the work of the Task and Finish groups have been sought from residents, and the Council will continue to do so where appropriate. Thank you.
And my supplementary question, subject to your decision later in the meeting and in the light of our inputs to the Task and Finish group to date, can you confirm that you would like us to work with both officers and the Task and Finish group through the construction phase of the project?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that once the decision is made, the Task and Finish group will step back once the contractors are employed to carry on and do the work. Thank you.
I'd like to call on Mr. Bob Hutchings, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Hallam. Can you confirm that the indicative cost of the zigzag, as reported to the Community Committee in August last year, has, as a result of everything achieved by your Task and Finish group, now been reduced by approximately £370,000?
Councillor Hallam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Hutchins. Thank you very much for your question, and it's great to see so many residents here this evening that are taking an active interest. In answer to your question, yes, And the details are within the report this evening, which we will be debating fully later on. Thank you.
I have a supplementary, Mr. Mayor. After that reduction of 370,000, the reported indicative cost still exceeds the budget by some £235,000. But we on the residents group have already given the Task and Finish group detailed suggestions regarding much of that excess. These include, following the suggestions in AECOM's new report, that there are items in the specification that could be omitted. Can you confirm that if our suggestions are taken into account, you will need very considerably less than the additional £235,000 being requested tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Our officers have taken a very cautious approach to ensure that tenders will come in well within the budget, and the final figure won't be known until the tender is totally agreed. All right.
Mr. Nigel Brooks, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My question is to Councillor Leslie Debman as Chair of the Planning Committee. Can you confirm that the Council has previously used and relied on permitted development rights for projects within the Highcliffe Beach area, which is within the site of special scientific interest?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Yes, the Council has used permitted development rights to carry out works where the scale and nature of the proposal complies with the criteria. And this is set out in Schedule 2, Part 12 of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Act, England Order 2015, of which I'm sure you're aware. If we're talking of the zigzag, which I assume we are, paragraph A2 of that order sets a limit of 200 cubic metres capacity for works undertaken under permitted development rights. As the proposed works for the zigzag exceed that volume, we are going to be going for full planning permission.
Thank you, Councillor.
I have a supplementary question, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the answer, Councillor. The recent planning application made in respect of Highcliffe Castle under the lottery fund bid did not include the zigzag path as part of the heritage site, which we have otherwise been advised by officers. Accordingly, will the Council then continue to look at the aspect of permitted development rights conferred on it by statute when it rebuilds the path on land that it owns?
Mr. Brooks, can you repeat that? Because I got a bit muddled towards the end. Thank you.
Indeed. The recent planning application in respect of Highcliffe Castle lottery funded works did not include the zigzag path as part of the heritage site. Accordingly, will the Council continue to use permitted development rights conferred on it by statute to rebuild the path, as the path is already on land that the Council owns?
Mr. Brooks, I think I'd have to take advice on that and let you know, because I think the answer would be no, but I'm going to ask the officers to let you know at a later date. Thank you.
That concludes the questions. Now move to item 7, petitions by members of the public. There are none. We now move to item 8, questions by members of the council. I'm going to advise you there are 12 questions that have been received from 5 members of the council on this occasion. Questions have been received from Councillor Spittle, Phipps, Bungie, Jones and Mrs Jones. Before the questions are put, I would just like to ask all members to omit any preamble before they put the question. Thank you. I'll first call upon Councillor Mrs Sue Spittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the leader. and I wish to ask the following question to the Leader of the Council. Like many, I have been extremely concerned and embarrassed about the behaviour and comments expressed by unknown councillors that have been reported in the press. Recently, even your dialogue between a senior officer regarding correspondence sent to the Secretary of State concerning LGR became public knowledge. This was followed by a report in the Daily Echo of an appalling comment expressed by a member regarding this highly respected officer. Whilst everyone is entitled to their views, does the leader agree that it is not acceptable to make such derogatory, thoughtless comments? Advise the council tonight whether an apology has been made by the councillor concerned, and if not, that he personally will ensure this is done. Confirm that he supports the Chief Executive Officer and his staff, who at present are facing an uncertain future, and has or is taking steps to ensure confidential material that could damage this council's reputation is not passed to the media. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Mrs. Spittle. I am sure you will agree that I cannot, as an individual, control every thought and action of individual members, and nor would I wish to. People are entitled to their opinion, as you say in your question. What I can do is respond quickly when views are expressed that I consider do not reflect either mine or what I believe to be that of the council. As soon as I was made aware of the article you refer to, I asked for the following to be added. I can confirm that the Chief Executive has the full support of myself and the Deputy Leader of the Council, and we believe the majority of members. I would like to reiterate this. David and our staff have my complete support. As Leader of the Council, I will be raising the issue of confidentiality with members outside of this meeting and emphasising the impact that inappropriate actions have on the reputation of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Leader. I'm very grateful actually for the Leader to confirm that he does support the Chief Executive and the staff. I was going to come back and ask about that actually with my supplementary, but my supplementary is, as you have agreed it is not acceptable, do you not agree that it is in your role as Leader to ensure that all councillors' behaviour or councillors behave appropriately in all council meetings? If so, how do you propose to overcome this in future, including tonight? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the answer to the question was given originally in my first statement, and I believe that this council has policy, procedures and a code of practice that all members should be following, and if they fail to do so, then it will be up to the officers to ensure that those members are brought to task over any misdemeanours that may happen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. The second question is from Mrs. Margaret Phipps. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually have two questions. My first is to the Chairman of Resources and my second to Leader. So shall I do just one at a time, obviously?
Yes, please.
All right, my first is to the Chairman of Resources. By how much will the Band D council tax for Christchurch residents in 2018-19 be higher than council tax for Band D residents in A, Bournemouth and B, Poole?
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Mrs. Margaret Phipps for the question. At this point of drafting the response, the proposed Band D for council tax for Bournemouth Borough Council for 2018-19 was £1,438.92. For the Borough of Poole, it was £1,399.67. And for Dorset County Council, Christchurch Borough Council was 1,607.16. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a supplementary on that. So, do you think it's right that Christchurch residents should continue to pay more council tax than Bournemouth and Poole residents if we become part of a unitary authority with them?
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I quite agree that we should have a balanced council tax. It should be levelled from the day that we have any new authority. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question number 3 is from...
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I've got a second one for
the
leader. My question for the leader is, regarding LGR, what is the latest estimate of costs of dissolving the Christchurch and East Dorset partnership?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thanks to Councillor Mrs. Phipps for her question. The expectation is that the cost of dissolving the partnership will be de minimis if LGR goes ahead. This is because both councils will be dissolved at the same time. Unlike a situation where one council decides to leave the partnership, leaving the other council to pick up ongoing overheads and creating separation costs. The council has contributed £80,000 towards a Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole fund to facilitate the costs of implementing a new council for April 2019. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no supplementary.
Thank you. Question number 3 is from Councillor Colin Bungay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first question is to the leader. Is the leader able to shed any light as to why it appears that Bournemouth and Poole authorities are unwilling to merge without having the assets of Christchurch Borough at their disposal to solve their financial problems? Is this in fact an asset stripping exercise to solve their problems? Thank you.
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thanks to Honorary Freeman Bungay for his question. I am not able to answer the first aspect of the question as this is a matter for them. The combined asset base for Bournemouth Borough Council and Borough of Poole is over 1.3 billion compared to our 70 million. The most significant of which is Highcliffe Castle, which is not valued at market value but at replacement cost. Therefore, the realisable value of our assets is much less. I do not believe it is the intention that CBC assets would be sold to resolve a financial problem, as this would only generate one-off monies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Supplemental, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Is it not a fact that much of the quoted Bournemouth and Poole assets are in fact mortgaged, and therefore, in my book, if you owe money on it, it's not an asset any longer, only when you sell it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am unaware of the business of Bournemouth and Poole with respect of whether or not they have mortgages on their assets. Thank you.
Your second question, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, this refers back to an earlier point made by Councillor Phipps. What decisions have been taken by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole joint committees in support of the stated policy of Christchurch Borough Council that if there were to be a new unitary authority for the area, that all Band D residents should pay the same council tax from the outset?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bungay, the Joint Committee resolved the following on the 15th of December 2017 and is the current position. That members provide assurance to the MHCLG, that is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, that a council tax strategy is well advanced to ensure that no council taxpayer will see an increase greater than the government's referendum limit and therefore pay no more than they would have done had there been no LGR. Harmonisation across all areas is achieved within 10 years. Council taxpayers in the Christchurch area see a freeze or reduction in their council tax throughout the harmonisation period. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, having attended the majority of the joint committee meetings, and I shall be there tomorrow with interest, all I have heard so far when Christchurch has raised the question of harmonisation from day one, which I think is almost a legal requirement, although I've been assured it's not, I have my doubts, that they have offered a 10, minimum 7 year. Does the leader not think that is unfair for the council taxpayer of Christchurch to subsidise the others for that period of time? And I doubt the answer that Christchurch council tax would be reduced. That's been fluffed several times but never actually answered. Thank you.
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members, I've always been of the opinion that council tax harmonisation should be from day one, and I don't think the residents of Christchurch should be disadvantaged by paying more for their services than people in Bournemouth and Poole. However, Councillor Bungley will also know that both myself and the Deputy Leader who sit on the Joint Committee voted against the proposal for the harmonisation which was put before the committee, therefore basically showing the residents of this borough our support for what we wanted to go for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your next question.
Final question to the leader, Chairman. Would the leader agree that following the result of the borough referendum, all councillors and indeed officers should now be working together to carry out the wishes of our residents? Would he also agree that the anti-Brexit attitude of some is causing disruption to this council's ability to get the best deal for its residents?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The representation that this council submitted to the Secretary of State reflected the council's views and included the results of the local poll. We have taken every opportunity to be absolutely clear that we wish to remain a sovereign council. These are challenging times and we are doing our best to ensure that whatever the outcome, CBC residents will not be disadvantaged. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
No supplemental, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. No further questions?
Question for the Chair of the Resources Committee. Is the Chairman able to tell members, now that the pitside car park has been sold, what the situation is regarding the freeholders of properties adjacent to the car park that have established rights of way across that car park for the servicing of their businesses and homes, including the collection of refuse?
Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I thank Councillor Colin Bungie for his question. In fact, I need to correct Councillor Bungie's understanding by pointing out that the council has exchanged contracts for the sale of the pitside car park. So the site will remain in the ownership of the council until the sale is completed. The site is sold subject to the legal rights which affect it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Colin.
I just have clarification on that, because we were told at a previous meeting that the contracts had been exchanged on the pit site. Is the Chairman therefore saying that those that have rights of way across the pit site will, once the site has been sold, still retain those rights? Because I am concerned that if we do not take those into consideration, we could in fact be facing a legal challenge from those people that have those rights. Thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that those rights will be preserved and they have been taken into consideration. As it said in the last part of my answer, that the subject is sold to the legal rights which affect it, and that includes the right of way.
Thank you, Councillor. Question number 4.
part of that question, I should like to ask the Chief Executive, through yourself, if as a member of the Christchurch Conservative Club that I have any interest in the matter which has just been discussed.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Mayor, a question was put to council. There's no debate on the matter, so I think it doesn't need members to declare any interest at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, your first question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To ask the leader, would you confirm that, as outlined to Scrutiny and Policy Overview Committee by the Chief Executive and the Strategic Director, the reason for the non-disclosure to members of the various council tax scenarios considered by the Task and Finish Group of the BCP Joint Committee was that the information was not the property of this council and could not be disclosed without the consent of the Joint Committee?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My thanks to Councillor Jones for his question. All the financial modelling relating to council tax harmonisation has been made public via the Joint Committee meeting of the 15th of January 2018. My expectation is that future modelling will also be made public at the Joint Committee scheduled for March. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a supplementary because, of course, the original information, as the leader pointed out, was not disclosed when it was first asked for, but was delayed on the grounds that the information was not the property of this council. Is the leader aware that I have taken advice from a very highly qualified source on this matter, and that advice is to the effect that the joint committees do not have the power to hold information, not being statutory committees, and any information they possess is the property of the parent councils.
Question.
Is the leader aware?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm not aware, but I would be grateful if Councillor Jones could put that in writing to me as soon as possible, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, your next question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To ask the leader what attempts are being made to ensure that the more open and democratic committee system will be the basis of any new South East Dorset unitary authority and not the undemocratic cabinet system preferred by Poole and Bournemouth Borough Councils.
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The governance arrangements for a new unitary council will be set out in the structural order being discussed by the Joint Committee. The Shadow Council will subsequently influence how those arrangements will be put into effect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, your next question.
No supplementary on that one, Mr. Mayor. If I may proceed to my next question. To ask the leader, is he aware that the Dorset Shire Joint Committee have been discussing the localisation of planning policy and control to the towns and parishes of Dorset? What discussions have taken place, if any, on the localisation of planning policy in the area of the proposed South East Dorset Unitary Authority?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To my knowledge, no discussions have taken place regarding the future planning policy of the proposed Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Unitary Authority. Should further information be sought, I would respectfully remind members that we have the opportunity to make any recommendations to the Joint Committee via this Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would the leader confirm, though, that the Joint Committee is overwhelmingly controlled by Bournemouth and Poole councils, that in any new authority, the planning policy will be controlled by councillors representing the area of Bournemouth and Poole, and planning control, however disguised, will be in the hands of councillors other than those elected for this borough?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that any proposals which come before the Joint Committee will be debated in that committee and a formal decision arrived at. We will make every effort to make sure that we are at those committees and obviously voted the way that we feel is the correct way for the residents of Christchurch. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, question number 5 comes from Mrs. Councillor Denise Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Leader of the Council. Is the Leader aware that there are strong suggestions that ministers have been informed that by participating in the Joint Committee, this Borough Council has consented to the future Dorset proposal? Will he now take the opportunity of condemning these rumours and stating unequivocally on behalf of the Council that the Council is completely opposed to the future Dorset proposal, and should the Secretary of State confirm his minded to decision, will fight to reverse the decision for as long as legally possible?
Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, thanks to Councillor Mrs. Jones for her question. The Secretary of State is absolutely clear that this council wishes to remain a sovereign council and does not wish to be part of a unitary council. Our participation on the Joint Committee is to ensure we are in the room when discussions are being had that will affect the residents we represent. We will continue to emphasise our opposition to LGR in Dorset, but we do have to be realistic that there may come a point when this will be counterproductive. For the residents we need to ensure are not disadvantaged. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank the Leader for his full reply and have no supplementary.
Thank you. That concludes the questions from members. We now move to item 9, the committee minutes. Councillor Flagg and Jameson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Proposer set out that the cycle of minutes be accepted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second.
Any dissent on that? No objections. Fine. Now move to item D, item 9D, Resources Committee, 17th of January 2018. Councillor Hall.
Thank you much, Mr. Mayor. This minute 251 is recommended that in accordance with the Local Government Authority calculation of the tax base, England Regulations 2012, the amount calculated for council tax base for the Christchurch Borough Council building area for the year 2018-19 of 19,948 be approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any debate? Sorry. Second, sorry, carry on.
I will second that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there any debate on that now? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of it? That minute is passed. Now, minute 252. Is there any debate on 252? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The declared surplus for the council collection fund relating to the council tax of 350,000 and subsequent shares for precipitating authorities, as per paragraph 4.2, we recommended to council for distribution. So proposed.
Mr. Mayor, may I interject? I was expecting Councillor Hall to propose minute number 252.
We've done 252. Or 252.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's quite all right, Peter.
It is recommended as 252. Members of the Resource Committee review the proposed changes to the contract procedural rules recommended for changes for the approval of full council.
Now do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Is there any debate? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? To the contrary? That minute is passed. Thank you. We now move to item 9E. Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose we receive the minutes of the Community Committee of the 24th of January 2018. The first minute to receive is minute 261, which is our response to the Bournemouth, Dorset and Poole pre-submission mineral sites and waste plan consultation.
Does anyone wish to speak to that minute? A seconder? I'm too quick. Does anyone wish to speak to minute 261? No. Councillor Bungey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just a point that was raised during the meeting that we had great concerns about the traffic movements through this borough, and I think that needs to be emphasised yet again, because not only have we got the Roshot Hill site coming on stream possibly, but also one lower down in the Hampshire area on the Burton side of the railway line. So we need to be aware with that and the Roshot Hill development, the congestion and problems that we will have were raised at the meeting, and I'd like those re-emphasised again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Phipps.
Thank you very much for your comments. I just point you to page 182, where the transport impact is clearly set out, and we do emphasise our concerns on that. And also the recommendation, the committee included an additional paragraph as well to state that Dorset County Council and Hampshire County Council should negotiate a financial contribution towards the delivery of a railway siding to allow the transportation of aggregates away from the site and minimise the impact of HGV movements on the transport network. So we are doing our very best, and we have emphasised the issues that we do have and our transport concerns on the highway network.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nottage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to compliment the Chair of Community Services in respect of the answer that she just gave there, bearing in mind that what we're talking about here, last time we checked, was between 120 and 160 lorry movements per 10-hour day through this town. And I was delighted to see that we have put the proposition in respect of the railhead, which seems to me to be the simple way to actually deliver this product down into the south of Dorset. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further debate on minute 261? Then I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those to the contrary? That minute is passed. We now take minute 262. Is there any debate on? Oh, sorry, Mary.
I'd like to propose minute 262, which are the results of the community engagement on the coastal strategy.
Seconder? Is there any debate on minute 262? Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say what a successful opportunity it was to hear our residents' views about how they feel about the coastline, and actually to put a marker down as to our residents, and their involvement was very much appreciated, and we did get a lot of responses that gave us a very good sounding ground for any future proposals along the coast, and to thank residents for their input.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hallam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just really wanted to echo Councillor Bath's words there, and to thank the residents for their contribution to the coastal strategy communications, and also to say what a great success I think it is. It's very positive that we've got that communication channel open now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further debate on that minute? Colin.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one point which I raised at the time on 262B, given the current uncertainty of local government review, that it was decided not to produce a strategy document at this time. I thought it rather dangerous that there was no official record of this strategy going to be made, and I was assured that the minutes would be on record, but we know that minutes can get lost, and in the event of local government reorganisation, I didn't want this strategy to disappear into the atmosphere, and I wanted it recorded somehow that this is what the Christchurch people wanted, this was going to be what would happen, and it wouldn't get lost. So I hope that was taken on board in some way. This will be recorded if we're not going to produce the strategy itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any further debate on the minute? I'll put it then to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Any abstentions? No. That's passed. Thank you very much. We now move to minute 263. Proposer?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose minute 263, which is the discharge of our this council's statutory housing duties within the private rented sector. Thank you.
Seconder?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any debate on that minute 263? Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to say what an important piece of work this is in respect of the Localism Act 2011 with regards to homelessness. And homelessness is very topical at the moment, and I believe that the efforts that our officers together with councillors have made is actually working exceptionally well, and I want to congratulate the officers because we were very much ahead of the game on all of the legislation and actually offering an awful lot of advice to residents in advance of the legislation becoming extant. So I want to congratulate officers for that and for working so well for all of our community with regards to providing homes for local people.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we all support that sentiment. Any further debate on minute 263? We'll then put that to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, Mem. We now move to item 9H. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Minute 284, that's from the Resources Committee on the 7th of February. And proposed minute 264, 284, Mr. Mayor. That's the revenue budget for 2018-19.
Who's seconding that?
Happy to second, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just suggest that perhaps you seek a proposer and a seconder for all 4 of those minutes, because I believe the leader is going to make a budget speech which touches on more than just the revenue budget.
Yeah.
So I think that would probably help the flow of business.
Is that approved by the floor?
That's fine. We'd propose all 4 minutes.
Would you? Yeah.
Well, Mr. Mayor, do you want, we've got the 4, 284, 285, 286 and 287, that's all to do with revenue. And I understood the leader was going to cover that.
I think if you propose all 4...
I propose them then, Mr. Mayor.
Do it that way.
And I will second them.
All 4.
Mr. Mayor, thank you.
No, the leader.
Now, the leader. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I would like to comment on the budget proposal and council tax for the year 2018-19 and request your consent to speak for more than 5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I would like to thank David McIntosh, the strategic directors, all of the heads of service, Dan Povey, Liz Walker, and the finance team for the considerable amount of effort put into the annual budget process. Yet again, we are presenting not only a balanced budget, but one with headroom. This is a testament to the endeavours of all of our staff with support from members. Members, for this council, 2017-18 has been a unique year to say the least. The level of debate, public engagement and consideration given to the local government reorganisation proposal regarding the future of this council is without doubt unprecedented. The single issue has been a dominant feature not only of council business throughout the year, but also as a personal one for all of us. We cannot have made the council's view clearer that we were opposed to the future Dorset submission. Moreover, the poll we undertook to canvass residents' views was unequivocal in its response for this council not to be part of a unitary council with Bournemouth and Poole. Despite our best efforts to present our case for this council to retain its sovereignty, the Secretary of State, in his initial minded to decision, has chosen to support the creation of 2 unitary councils in Dorset, and we still await his second decision. The fact I may be presenting the final budget for this council is most poignant. I am proud to be both a Christchurch resident and indeed a representative of the residents of this ancient and historic borough. However, if the Secretary of State does confirm his initial decision, we can at least hold our heads high and say we did absolute best to try and fulfil the will of our residents. Like many of you, I have made my view clear that I oppose the dissolution of this council. If we are faced with the prospect, I can assure you I will continue to fight to ensure that our residents are not disadvantaged in any way, and I look forward to your support in doing what is the best in the interest of people we represent. Despite the distraction of local government reorganisation debate over the last year, we have continued to deliver some outstanding examples of supporting our community with our partners East Dorset District Council. These include, but are not limited to, growth and economy, We are leading on a major skills development project in support of key business sectors that will underpin future jobs, growth and prosperity. We are supporting businesses in rolling out the apprenticeship levy through a range of workshops and seminars which have been attended by a great many local businesses. We carry out extensive work with schools on schemes such as the Young Enterprise, which we are proud to support, and also helping schools to develop industry-relevant curriculums, such as the BTEC Level 3 in engineering at the Grange School. We deliver a successful micro-business network, which has earned international recognition, with the Council represented at an OECD conference in Paris last autumn. I myself have attended meetings with some of our most important businesses to learn more about what they do and how we can support them. We have some world-class businesses in Christchurch which we should be proud of, and we need to ensure they continue to thrive and prosper. It is therefore not surprising that our business income is growing, as a result, as members will have noticed in the budget reports. Local business success is good for the community and good for the council, so we must maintain support for the local economy as a key aim for the council. Access to housing. Preparations are in place for the implementation of the Homelessness Reduction Act in April 2018. This will have a major impact on all councils, and the proactive approach to preventing homelessness we already have in place at Christchurch will stand us in good stead. We are delivering more housing in line with our local targets, but we need to do more as demand for housing continues to outstrip supply. Our housing team work tirelessly on often difficult and challenging cases. There is a fear that we will need to deal with more cases of this nature as a personal support service provided by the County Council and other agencies is being reduced. We therefore need to be increasingly innovative and proactive, and I note the successful relaunch of our Housing Forum, which a number of members recently attended, and the work which the Local Government Association are assisting us with in identifying more opportunities to provide temporary accommodation. Challenging times which we need to meet head on. Effective council. Approximately £7 million of savings delivered as a result of prudent management of the council's resources and the brave step to work in close partnership with East Dorset. The rationalisation of office accommodation across the partnership, which has created significant income for us and which ensures scarce resources remain focused on the needs of our customers. A step change in the way our staff work, capitalising on work more flexibly and using new technology in order to operate as efficiently as possible. Providing our customers with an increasing number of opportunities to get the information they need online and to pay for services at the same time, whilst maintaining traditional opportunities so that no one is left behind. Community. Highcliffe Castle. Following the successful Heritage Lottery Fund Award for the Phoenix Files project to restore the east wing of the castle, the team were also successful in obtaining further grants and donations of £150,000. The work to restore the east wing has begun and is on schedule for completion in the spring of 2019. The work to open up the lost footpaths and landscaping has been completed, and low-key children's play equipment has been installed. The new cafe contract was successfully let for a further 15.5 years and is proving popular with visitors and residents alike. The Coast. A public engagement exercise aimed at finding out what the public wanted from our coastal estate proved extremely popular, as we've already heard this evening, and gave a clear message of no change. Improvements are underway at Avon Beach, which should improve the coast protection in that area, as well as providing new seating. Along with the Mayor, Mayoress and Councillor Hall, I recently attended a launch event at Two Rivers Meet, where the council has recently invested approximately £100,000 in new and upgraded facilities that has enabled us to maintain our income and membership levels over the past year. This is despite competition from new and existing gym facilities in the borough. Wildflower displays. We have continued to extend the number of locations for wildflower displays across the borough, and these have been really well received by residents and visitors alike. The grounds maintenance team continue to meet all targets and come up with ideas for innovation and improvements to their service levels. Steamer Point Lodge. Following conversion of the lodge into a holiday let accommodation, we have had our first full year of operation, and it has proved incredibly popular, with bookings almost every week throughout last year. The accommodation is fully booked until the end of November this year, and bookings are already being taken for 2019. Corporate. Improving our communication with residents. We have doubled the number of press releases between 2016 and 17, seen a 600% increase in Twitter posts between 2016 and 2017, seen high levels of resident interest in our e-newsletters. We have regular live tweeting from the key council meetings, and seen the introduction of live streaming of committee and council meetings. Awards. A great year for achieving recognition for quality of services and the way we run our organisation. CIPD Award for Smarter Working, September 2017. Star Valley and Pool Partnership wins the IRRV Award in October 2017. The Pennies from Heaven Award, February 2017. 3 Seaside Awards for Christchurch Beaches, back in May 2017. The Green Flag Award for the Christchurch Quay, and the Southwest Challenge Runners-Up and Best Partnership back in October 2017. Performance. We are indeed grateful to the Planning Advisory Service, who have recently examined our improvement work and recognised the progress we have made. At the same time, we recognise there is always opportunity to improve, and will take on board their recommendations to the service over the coming year. Managing our environment. A substantial step change in recycling performance, putting Dorset amongst the best performing recycling authorities in the country. Savings for Christchurch in excess of 1.3 million over the last 6 years as a result of pursuing a partnership approach to managing Dorset's waste. High levels of satisfaction amongst residents with their waste collection service. We further intend to deliver or ensure the commitment of our capital programme in 2018-19, which stands at over 6 million. This includes amounts set aside for the Avon Beach Promenade, the Highcliffe Zigzag Path, the Regent Centre, car parking alterations, housing, and repairs to Christchurch Quay. Complementary to our principle to invest, we have always been mindful of the need to have sufficient reserves in hand to mitigate the uncertainty of the current local government financial position. We have maintained this principle and will continue to do so throughout 2018-19. Our approach has been one that assesses the risk we face in order to ensure that we have set aside for unseen events. These have been adequate, but does not tie up resources unnecessarily. This brings me to the 2018-19 revenue budget and medium-term financial plan. This may be our last budget. It may be not. So I will still reference the long-term view given the uncertain position we find ourselves in. To date, this council has responded well to the financial challenges it has faced. Service delivery has been maintained and the council's financial position strengthened through a flexible and prudent approach that has combined a strategy on council tax, savings from partnership working, and a thorough budget reviews that scrutinise both costs and income. A product of this strategy is that a balanced budget has been set each year, which includes a revenue surplus generated from front-loaded savings. However, this position could change in 2019-20. The financial position is that in 2013-14 we received £1.3 million in revenue support grants. In 2018-19 we will receive none. In 2019-20 we might be paying the government £375,000. So from a grant position of 1.3 to a payment of 375,000, a loss of nearly 1.7 million in income. We have responded to this and can, without exception, say we have cut no services, not one. This has been down to the willingness to transform and work in partnership, to be prudent but also to invest wisely. The proposed budget for 2018-19 represents a balanced budget with headroom, including of £486,000. The medium-term financial strategy models a balanced budget position up until 2019-20. Once the 2018-19 budget has been set, we will await the decision of the Secretary of State, and if necessary, the medium-term financial strategy will be reworked and then brought back to Council for member consideration, with options relating to what actions might be required to achieve the savings in 2019-20 and beyond. We'll have to wait and see if 2019-20 is an issue for us or a new council. If it is our challenge, I'm certain we will rise to it again. Our financial position is and has been strong in comparison to other councils, and that is a direct result of the way we manage our services and finances. We will continue to work with East Dorset Council, whether that be in the short or long term. The potential disillusion of this very successful partnership is also a very bitter pill to swallow. Business rates have been a positive story again for us and demonstrates the emphasis we have placed on supporting the district economical potential. We are expecting an increase of nearly £487,000 against a forecast of business rate income for this council in 2018-19. The council has received notification of the provisional new homes bonus allocation for 2018-19. The council will receive £388,000 next year in comparison to £659,000 which was received for 17-18, a reduction of some £271,000. This is a result of the government changing the basis of the calculation of the grant. With regard to council tax, the government has increased the referendum limit to 3% for us in 2018-19, in recognition that additional funding is required by local government, albeit falling at the door of local taxpayers. We have resisted the temptation of freeze grants and have benefited from this approach, which has enabled us to continue to fund local services. I propose that a 2.99% per annum increase, equivalent to under 11 pence per week, is recommended, which will generate £116,000 to support the valued services we continue to provide. Members, I said at the start of this speech that I was proud of being part of this very special borough, and I'm sure you will agree that I have shared with you tonight reinforces that. We have done much as a council, not just in recent times, but throughout the history of this unique and ancient borough. Whatever our future, our legacy will add to the history, regardless of the decisions made remotely by a minister. I am hopeful that the Secretary of State will remove the uncertainty regarding the future without any further delay. If he chooses to support the reorganisation of local government in Dorset, it will be a blow. But we must be pragmatic, and as we have always done, we must ensure that Christchurch, its residents and its staff get the continued support deserved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any member wish to speak to that minute? Number 284. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I fully support the leader's comments in his report. I would also like to formally recognise the support given by volunteers heavily involved in the daily operation of numerous facilities across the borough. The joint working with councils at our community centres, Highcliffe Castle, Regent Centre, the Tourist Information, the Red House Museum, the Friends of Stampit Marsh, and many, many more. The passion and commitment of the volunteers supporting the council is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to ask the leader of the council perhaps for some clarification, and it's to do with one of the questions that was asked earlier on and the answer that was given about harmonisation. And as we're setting our council tax, I think it's pertinent, and I just seek the leader's view on this, that I understand that the answer to the question was that the councils, Bournemouth and Poole, would only have to raise their council tax in accordance with the current regulations on precept capping. My point is that de facto, this new council, should it be Bournemouth, Dorset, and Bournemouth, Poole, and Christchurch, Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, will not have existed. It is not a council that we can say, as this body, we're going to raise the council to a cap, because it is brand new, squeaky clean. So I just wonder whether we, as a sovereign authority at this moment, could continue to lobby national government through our officers, senior officers and directors, to clarify the point that a new council cannot be held to decisions that were made by a previous council because it didn't exist. So I just seek the leader's view on that. Sorry to sort of ask that question in such a way.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I prefaced my speech this evening by saying that we were looking at the budget for Christchurch Borough Council to remain as it is, and anything beyond that will be out of our. My understanding is that the Christchurch Borough Council will no longer be, it will be dissolved, and that will be the end of it. So we're looking at, as far as I'm concerned, we are looking at an answer from the Secretary of State to say no, and that's what we've budgeted for this evening, and that's what's before members to look at. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bungie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to congratulate the leader and the officers. It's really quite heartwarming to see how well this borough is doing and how well it is done in partnership with East Dorset. It's just very upsetting to feel that all that could be lost if the Minister makes the decision that we hope he won't. A lot of hard work has gone in over the years to bring us to the point we are at. We have officers working very well with businesses around the borough. Our enterprise is doing well. I believe it's above average for the county and expanding. And my regret would be that we lost all that, because big is not beautiful in any stroke of the imagination, and the, shall we say, the interaction between our officers and businesses within this borough is excellent. And if that is removed to a more isolated position, I fear that things will deteriorate. So I'm hoping that the Minister will say no, go back and think again. But I'd like to congratulate the leader and the officers on the report that we've had today, because it is quite uplifting to know that the borough is doing that well and it's meeting all its commitments. And long may it continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further speakers? Then before I go to the vote, I have to advise members that in accordance with the Local Authority Standing Orders, England Amendment, Regulations 2014, a recorded vote must be taken on the recommendations relating to Minute 284, Revenue Budget 218-219. Chief Executive will...
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, you're familiar with the process of a recorded vote. You have the recommendations in front of you. If you could clearly say whether you are for, against, or whether you wish to abstain. And we'll go in alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Abbott.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Beth.
For.
Councillor Bungie.
For.
And Councillor Davis is absent. Councillor Mrs. Deadman.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Darren Wilkes is absent. Councillor Flagg. Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Geary.
For.
Councillor Grace.
For. For.
Councillor Hall. For. Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Hilliard. For. Councillor Mr. Jameson.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Jameson. For. Councillor Mr. Jones.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Jones. For. Councillor Lofts.
For.
Councillor Neal.
For.
Councillor Nottage.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Phipps.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Smith.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spittle.
For.
And Councillor Watts.
For.
That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does any to speak on Minute 285? I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour?
Unanimous.
That's unanimous. Does anybody wish to speak to Minute 286? Put that then to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. Any member wish to speak on Minute 287? I'll then put that to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. We'll now move to item 10, the council tax. Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, we are asked to approve the council tax resolutions as set out in Appendix 1 of the supplemental papers this evening. I would just like to make note, with particular reference to the Dorset County Council precept, I can advise members that the 5.99% increase as set out in table at H2 consists of a 2.99% increase within the referendum limit, together with a 3% increase ring-fenced for social care. This being the balance of the 6% maximum permitted by central government, which the County Council has taken in two 3% tranches, and I will formally propose as set out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak to that proposal? No speakers? Before I go to the vote, I must advise you once again, members, that in accordance with the Local Authority Standing Orders, England and the Amendment, Regulations 2014, a recorded vote must be taken on this item. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, members, if you could clearly state whether you're for, against, or wish to abstain to the recommendations in terms of council tax for 2018-19. And starting with Councillor Abbott.
For.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bungie.
For.
Councillor Davis is absent. Councillor Mrs. Dedman.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Downbrooks is absent. Councillor Flagg.
For.
Councillor Fox.
For.
Councillor Geary.
For.
Councillor Grace.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Councillor Hallam.
For.
Councillor Hilliard. Councillor Mr. Jameson. Councillor Mrs. Jameson. Councillor Mr. Jones. Councillor Mrs. Jones. Councillor Lofts. Councillor Neal. Councillor Nottage.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Phipps. Councillor Mrs. Smith.
For.
Councillor Mrs. Spittle.
For.
And Councillor Watts. That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Right, we now move to item 10. Beg your pardon, start again. Item 11, the Highcliffe Zigzag Path Task and Finish Group. Councillor Hallam.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and excuse my croaky voice. I hope everybody can hear me okay. The last time this full council met to debate the future of Highcliffe Zigzag Path, it was agreed that a task and finish group should be formed to work with officers and residents in order to identify a more affordable solution than the original 1.25 million quoted. I believe that the task and finish group has set out and achieved its objective, and I would very much like to thank all involved, the officers, residents, councillors and AACOM. It's been a very complex and time-consuming process. However, with persistence and focus, the outcome is particularly positive. We, being the councillors, officers and residents, have worked together with the common goal of finding a more affordable solution to opening the zigzag path, which is vital to our borough. Overwhelming support has been received via our coastal strategy and the petition in support of maintaining the zigzag, both from residents and businesses who recognise the importance of this facility. It's the gateway between our treasured historic Highcliffe Castle and our beautiful coastline and beaches, which we are all proud of. We must ensure that this gateway is open to everyone so that we can take pleasure in these assets. The health and well-being of our residents is of great importance, and we should be encouraging healthy lifestyles with regular walks, not to mention enhancing visitor experience when visiting our borough. Tourism has a positive impact on our local economy and economic growth, which mustn't be ignored. As you will be aware from your papers, and is indicated earlier from the question Mr. Hutchings asked, the overall estimate has now been reduced considerably by 370,000 from the original 1.25 million, as originally quoted. The new figure now being 880,500. Members, however, should be reminded that there are already allocated funds to this project of 645,000. And therefore I'm looking for your support to approve the additional 239,500, 183,000 of which is contingency and therefore may not even be used at all. So in actual fact, in reality, we're really only looking for an additional 56,500 to complete the work in a best case scenario. Mr. Mayor and members, I'd like to recommend the proposal set out before you. Thank you.
Is that a proposal, Councillor?
Yes, this is, Mr Mayor.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to second the motion that is before you, and like my fellow councillor, who's the chairman, thank all of the residents and all of the people who've been involved in this, and also thank the residents who've come along tonight and waited so patiently through this quite long meeting for this item to come before us. The councillors who supported the motion to rescind the original decision, which was to close the zigzag path, and to look to reduce the original estimate of costs by reducing the specification to its current form. I'd like to thank all the many residents who've made it exceptionally clear to us that they value this path enormously, and to their action group that gave us invaluable insight into how to reduce the specification through their professional support. I'd also like to thank ACOM and our officers who've provided us with revised specification and worked hard to achieve the goals that we set out. Members of the Task and Finish group who didn't give up on tirelessly looking at ways to get the current position before you. A further funding option which has just been offered to us is by Martin Stewart, the Managing Director of Stewart's Garden Centres, who has very generously offered their expertise, subject to an agreed specification, to organise, manage and implement the planting, which would reduce the overall cost by £20,000. With regards to the funding being requested today, I do need to point out that the estimate before members rightfully contains large margins of contingencies, and our officers have taken a very cautionary approach to this project. In addition to the ACOM 20% contingency of £83,000, our officers have added an additional contingency of £100,000. And in ACOM's table on page 45, value engineering options, which could reduce the cost by £41,000, have yet to be removed from the figures that we're asking you to consider tonight. And when we were questioning ACOM when they came to our various meetings, they also suggested that there is a possibility of retaining the soil on site rather than removing it, and this figure is in the estimates as being £25,000, so another saving could be achieved. So if you take out all of the above and the 5% tolerances added to the actual figure, it comes actually under the previously approved funds. I'm sure that our officers, together with the Task and Finish group, which will continue to consider the tenders received in the light of these possible savings and ensure very best value of public funds being used. So you can tell that this has been a very collaborative approach to achieving an outcome which is supported by over 3,000 local residents, and I'm sure many more who didn't necessarily sign the petition. I urge members to look at the bigger picture of the economic benefit to Highcliffe Castle, the health benefits to our community, and the legacy that we leave behind for future generations. Please vote to approve the additional funds necessary to let us get a move on to tender out and reopen this path at the very earliest opportunity. And I request to reserve my rights to come back if necessary before the proposer sums up.
Are there any speakers? Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we should congratulate the Task and Finish group because they have been very busy and spent a lot of time getting this resolution for us. I think the 239,500 is affordable. It's a contingency fund, and all I hope is that, in the interest of everyone, that the tenders come in at a realistic price so we can get ahead and get the job done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lofts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am, of course, a ward councillor for the area with Councillor Mrs. Hallam. I think when discussions first opened last year, that we were meant to be in the summer. It didn't feel like it, but that's perhaps because I'm getting that much older. I need a lot more warmth than I used to. But my principal objection at that time was I thought the cost that was being put forward of £1.25 million was excessive. I would like members to realise this is before the further details of a possible local government reorganisation were generally available. I have watched with considerable concern, and that has turned into admiration for the work undertaken by our officers, and, if I may say so, my colleagues on the little subcommittee that was set up later in the year. I think we, as a small council, have gone as far as we can in trying to resolve this matter within the costs which are sensibly allowed to us. And therefore, I would like to make absolutely clear, in view of what I was saying the tag end of last summer, my total support for what has been achieved through the work of the small subcommittee, of which admittedly I've been a member, and the work of the officers, which in my view has been outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you'll permit me, I just want to put the record straight. Earlier in the evening, Judy Berman, in her supplementary question, asked me whether or not the task and finish group would continue, and I believe that I said that it would continue to the point that the contract was let. And I note in the recommendation this evening at D, it's proposed that the task and finish group to continue until the footpath works have been completed and officers report progress back to the group monthly. So I'd like to apologise for the answer that I gave, and I was unaware of the at D, and should the recommendation go through, that will then give Judy Berman the correct answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jameson. Mrs. Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, when this item came up to committee last year, I voted against the going ahead with the zigzag path. And at that time, I thought that was the right decision. And I'm glad I did vote against it, because look what we're saving now. I think this is a wonderful thing. I will certainly support it, and I look forward to seeing the zigzag path up and running again.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a member of the Task and Finish group, I fully support the recommendation before us. I would, however, draw members' and residents' attention to section 3.9 in the report, because again, some misleading information early in the evening. So, as you can imagine, this is quite a substantial engineering initiative in sensitive and volatile cliff side. So what we've got before us in the report is costings from our professional engineering consultants. Now, this now needs to go to tender, and as you can imagine, it's a thorough tender and a regulated procedure, which takes a number of weeks. So that's first. We've also covered planning. That needs to be addressed. So as the section 3.9 says, that construction work won't commence until autumn, with completion by Easter 2019. But as with everything, that's a prudent, hopefully worst case scenario. So if things go ahead, hopefully it will be open before, and possibly with a bit of luck, maybe Christmas this year. But what also, so the idea, so we had the officers present and the professional engineering consultants present. So yes, it would be nice to start work in the summer, but they made it clear that because there's heavy plant machinery on a sensitive beach in summer, similarly, people using the castle, it would be too disruptive and too dangerous. So I fully understand why work won't start to autumn, but they will do the best to complete in the shortest time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bungie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too sat on the task and finish group, and I think everyone set out with the full intention of trying to get this work carried out and the path back open. But I do have concerns, you know, after 30 odd years in the construction industry, I am concerned about the stability of the cliffs and the constant movement there. And I do worry with the heavy plant that we may have some problems. We heard earlier that the earth may be retained on the site. Well, the officers and ACOM have already said that that earth is not suitable for use as backfill in the path because it doesn't let water run through. So I'd like to know where, if it's not going to be taken away from the site, where it's going to be dumped. The other concern is the drainage that I have, because again, I am concerned that whether sufficient drainage has been incorporated into that design, and that will probably be looked at. But my final question is, if when the tenders come back, the costs do exceed what we have budgeted for, where do we go from there? Because we might be in the situation then where our accounts have been frozen. So we need to take all options into account on this. I will support it this evening, but I do have severe reservations as to whether the costings will come in as we forecast. I think it will go way above because of the very nature of what we're talking about and the instability of the land in that position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor David Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council. There are two views on what local government should be doing. One of them, which is now a slightly old-fashioned one, is that you decide what the people need and you give it to them. The other one, which is, I believe, much more up to date, is you ask the people what they want and you do your best to meet those wishes. Now, when we have, in recent years, we've discussed in this council chamber the cliff top at Highcliffe on two separate topics. One, which we will all remember, was the proposal for, quote, beach huts, unquote. And there we were not asking the people what they wanted, we were telling them what they were going to get. Now, look at what's happened when we've changed our approach. We are working with the residents. We are saying to the people, this is where you live. What do you want out of this? And let us see if we can work with you to get what is the best solution. Now, it may be, as Councillor Bungay has mentioned, that circumstances beyond our control mean that it can't be done. All right? We have tried. We have worked with the people. I think now, if it comes back and there is overpowering evidence that it can't be done, or it can't be done without the expenditure of a great deal of money that we don't have, and we can show the reasons, it may be that that will be a better outcome than just saying to people, this is what you're going to get, or we're going to take your path away. Now, I congratulate those councillors who, on this occasion, have decided it's a good idea to work with the residents. I am pleased that I was able to play a small part in getting this brought back to council, getting the minute rescinded. I am delighted at the outcome. I congratulate all those involved. I will certainly support this, because this is what happens when you work with people. One slight question. 21,000 odd people said we don't want something. One man might say we're going to get it. I shudder to think what the consequences of trust in democracy will be. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was one of the councillors that put forward the motion to full council to rescind the original decision, and I've also been with others a member of the Task and Finish group. You'll see in the papers we've had several meetings, and I can say this has not been easy. We have managed to achieve a reduction in costs and make this what I consider will be affordable for this council. As has also been said, there's been a huge collaboration of all the people that have been named, the groups that have been mentioned, residents and officers and everyone. And that has been so important. And this is such an important path for residents, for visitors, for businesses and for Highcliffe Castle. I appreciate that concerns have been raised, but the professionals, that's ACOM, they've come to our meetings, we've spoken with them direct, they've gone away, they've come back with information, and they have said that it can be done within the given costs that we have before us. So now I think it's so important, we must go out to tender. Let's find out. Let's see. But the professionals say it can be done. So I support this recommendation, and I would ask all members here to give their support as well for something that is really, really important to this borough, and let's just see if we can get this path back up and running.
Thank you. Councillor Watts.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, apologies. Through you, I think the leader was going to clarify that point as to whether or not full planning consent was going to be required. But I think you are in a different role here. So at the moment you're allocating resources to move forward with a scheme. When you get that scheme and when you consider that as a planning application, you have a different role, and you can therefore switch from your role at the moment in terms of the finance to that of the planning committee. So you will not be predetermining your position at that point.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spittle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And also may I reiterate our thanks to the Task and Finish group, who have worked exceedingly hard in getting the report to us. Also, you'll be relieved I am going to stick to the subject in hand, and namely the zigzag path. As members are aware, I represent an area in Christchurch furthest away from the site of the zigzag. So I had slight concerns whether residents would appreciate the sheer cost of this project. But I'm very pleased to say I have had overwhelming feedback that residents do support from West Christchurch this cost and appreciate that the path will be available for residents borough-wide. It will also become an asset for both the castle and the borough, and I trust, in view of the complexity of the work that has been carried out, it will certainly last longer than the former path. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dedman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There has been a mention tonight of a previous report that was made onto the beach hut situation that we had. And I think, having been one of the generators of that report, the main message from that was that the council had not communicated and should in future communicated. And I think I can say that this we have certainly done. I commend the work that the Task and Finish group have put into all this, and the officers, of course, and I shall be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Nottage.
Mr. Mayor, before we get self-congratulatory, I think that we should be aware of the recommendations that are in front of us, read them and understand them. Basically, this issue will be going to tender. It will be tendered in accordance with our new tender regulations, and I'm sure adhered to S041A within those regulations. I too have to congratulate the tenacity of the Task and Finish group. Councillor Hallam and Bath were not to be deterred by a decision taken in committee, and I'm sure residents will acknowledge that should an acceptable outcome be achieved, that fact. Further, it does seem to me to be important that the Task and Finish group should be engaged through the tendering process in such a way to ensure value for money for the taxpayer, who at the end of the day will be funding this huge sum of money. I do sense a determination from members to proceed with this tendering process against the original decision made by Community Services Committee, and I also acknowledge the concerns from residents as to the loss of this facility in their particular area. So on balance, we'll support the next tendering stage. However, there should be caveats, and the first should obviously be in respect of not exceeding the budgeted figures tabled. Further, I'm really concerned as to the legacy such a project might deliver should the cliffs have the audacity to succumb to slippage after completion. And what I conceive to be a greater concern, that the cost of maintenance over the course of the supposed 30-year life of the project. Perhaps there is here an opportunity for residents to develop schemes or contribute to potential costs of maintenance to ensure that legacy is not passed on to future communities. So, Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting this next process with, I have to say, some considerable trepidation as to the huge sums of money involved, and obviously aggrieved, and I haven't heard this evening yet, agreed and allocated by the chairman of the Resources Committee. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further speakers? Councillor Hallam, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really think it needs me to say too much, actually, to sum up. I'm really encouraged by the debate this evening. I think certainly for the members, the way they've spoken in support, and also to see the number of residents here in support, all wearing their lovely badges with pride as well, was lovely. We really need to get this tabled and a vote to go forward, and then really to look to get moving on the project, providing obviously everybody does, and we do get that vote for everybody, so that we can start moving out and putting it out to tender. We will be working as a task and finish group and overseeing as it goes through the process. I do understand my fellow councillors' concerns. It is a large amount of money. However, I do think that it's a project worth fighting for, and it's important to everybody and the borough. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'll put the recommendation and proposal to the floor. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, members of the public, for your patience, and I'm glad that the result is as it is, as I voted. Councillor Nottage, you wanted to say something?
Only, Mr. Mayor, that I still haven't heard that the chairman of Resources will be allocating these funds. How is that decision going to be taken? Is that going to be put back to committee?
That will
The council
obviously
just
come back
has.
to committee, Mr. Mayor.
Council just has. There being no more business for this council, I declare the meeting closed, and once again, thank you all for your patience and participation.